Hi there, everyone. So we just made an achromatic just with ivory black and thinner. We use the Terp Natural, we use the solvent-free fluid and the solvent-free gel, and I didn't use the linseed oil. And I did it like a charcoal drawing or an ink wash drawing where I made the paint thick and thinner to get the value scale. We're gonna let this dry, and then I'm gonna mix up a black, gray, and white value scale. I'm gonna repaint it. And then when that dries, I'm gonna glaze it with color. So we're just gonna set this one aside for now. Hopefully you can see it. I think it was like a little shiny when we looked at it in the last video. I'll post a picture of it. I'm gonna put that aside for now. This was the trace and transfer that I made it from. But then I went ahead and I printed this picture in color, and we're gonna do a direct painting today. So I fussed this picture in my photo editing software on my phone, but you could do it in Photoshop or whatever softwares you wanna use. And you can even just print one of my pictures if you want. But I wanted to talk a little bit about color. I'm gonna mix my palette first, and then I'll stop the video, and then we'll switch to the actual painting. I did a trace and transfer of it again, and I thought, well, maybe I could lift it or shift it. I could have made it bigger or changed it. I had printed it in black and white bigger. I could have traced it that way, but I thought just to compare literal apples to apples, I would keep it the same. But what I want you to do is I want you to look at your image, and I want you to try and break it down into complements. So complements, we'll get more into color theory later, but just as a preview of sorts, the complements are opposite on the color wheel. So yellow, violet, red, green, blue, orange. So if we say that our primaries are blue, red, and yellow, the primary has an opposite, which is orange. This primary has an opposite, which is green, and this primary has an opposite that's yellow. I'm gonna go with red and green as my main because it's mostly a red apple, and then I could imagine that this has some greens in it. It doesn't, but I'm just gonna simplify it for getting us started on mixing up a palette. Like I said, we'll get more into color theory. We'll talk about our tertiaries more later. But before I lay it out, I just want to show you how our red, our blue, and our yellow are actually the primaries. But if I'm building a complementary color palette, I have to use blue and yellow to make green. So if I'm working with complements, I'm actually using the full color wheel. Yes, our standard kit comes with a green, but it's super high chroma and really acidic. And I can use that in this painting, but I want to try and work with my primaries to really get us going. And I simplify it down into this family. Okay, so like I said, I'm just going to mix my palette in this video, then I'll pause it and we'll come back to actually making the painting. Okay. So I have some of my black paint out from when I painted a little bit ago. I can leave that there. Just gonna get these brushes out of the way for now. Okay, so I'm gonna use my primaries, and I'm gonna again try to do a red-green complementary split. So I'm going to put my red warm on one side, a hefty chocolate chip, and I might need some more as I go. And then I'm going to do my yellow over here, and my green, or my blue over here. And I'm going to mix up my green. So I'm going to, whenever I mix color, I'm always going to start with the light value. If I started with the blue, I would make a ton of paint. But by starting with the lighter value color, it allows me to slowly kind of build that value. So I'm gonna clean my palette knife so I don't contaminate my blue. And I'm gonna use a tiny bit, like a little donut sprinkle. And I'm gonna squish the paint back and forth. Scoop it up, squish it, so that I'm combining all of that pigment together. Sometimes when I see people start to mix paint, and all of you I think have mixed some paints with the black and white, we talked about this, but we just want to make sure we don't stir it, because that's not squishing those colored pigments together. What a pretty green that is. I could look at my picture and see if maybe I could use that in some of the lights. I'm trying to think value, not so much color, but what I'm gonna do is grab a little bit of that, scooch it over, and add a little more blue, 2 little donut sprinkles. And I think about if that could make some of my darks. That'd be like my 70 maybe. I'm gonna make a much lighter one. I can, you know, I'm gonna take all that and then I can do a straight out of the tube yellow in a minute. Tiny bit, barely. So I've got a little value scale, but it's working with chroma instead of tints, tones, and shades. I'm going to put a little more yellow on my palette. Another chocolate chip size. And I want to make one more darker value. So a little less and a little more. A little less yellow, a little more blue. And now I've got this nice little value scale of greens working around the outside of my palette. Okay, so I know I said I'm using this red-green split, but because green is made from these and I have my primaries, I am going to mix just a little bit of orange. Again, I'm going to take my lighter. I'm basically making a color wheel. Tiny bit of red. It's pretty high chroma. I can explain how we can push that down later. But now I've got a pretty full palette without much work. I want to squirt out a little bit of the tube green so you can see how it's different. You can see that it's this much more like jewel tone, kind of bright color. Clean off my knife again. And I'll take a little yellow and a tiny bit of that green. You can see how different. It's like super high chroma, vibrant green, which isn't really in my painting, but I might use it for a highlight. Okay, so I have my black from before. I'm going to lay out a little bit of my titanium white on the other side. So I've got my value scale here. And it's so important to spend time mixing up this palette before you actually paint. So you can see where I have these kind of warmer peaches. I can grab some of that white and then grab a little of this homemade orange that I made. And I'm getting a little closer. So here's the fun part. Are you ready? I want to desaturate that color. So the opposite of our orange is blue. I'll show you. I've been working red, green, but here's my orange. Opposite is the blue. So I'm going to grab the tiniest, I'm talking the tiniest bit of blue. And I'm making what we call a chromatic gray. And this is how we desaturate our colors. How beautiful is that? It's so pretty. Look how far that blue is going. That's called the tinting strength. And I'm getting closer to getting some of the colors that I need. Okay, that should be enough for us to get started on our palette. So I'm going to turn off the video, then I'll turn it back on, and we're going to talk about direct painting, where we fill in the second coloring book and we try to do it all at once. We're going to need to keep mixing and changing colors as we go, but this has got enough to get us started because I have this nice value scale. I've got my complements working, and then we'll build from there. Okay, I'm going to turn off the video and then we'll start back in just a second.